What's up, guys? This is Heiss, and welcome back to our Walthers Build-A-World series. It has been more than a couple weeks. It was supposed to be a couple weeks, and it ended up being a couple months. My hugest apologies on that. Had several bits of travel and all sorts of things going on, and it took me away from the ability to work on this wonderful kit for a little bit. But we're back, and we're in month number 4. So this month, based on the instructions, it looks like we're going to be building some buildings. So we've got our module out here. Remember in episode 1 we did the track and the construction. Episode 2 we added the rock wall, and then episode 3 we did the grass and the pond, all of which turned out pretty well. Next, what we're doing here is we've got some building kits out today. So it looks like, based on the instructions, that we've got both a house and a garage. The garage is a significantly smaller kit versus this. And it seems like the first step is to paint stuff. So we're gonna kind of get into that a little bit. Got my computer case cardboard box here for protection, and we're gonna start here. So they recommend painting things first, which is contrary to what I've done in the past, but I've also never received formal instruction. Rather than despruing the parts, and the instructions say about 1,500 times over, don't desprue the parts. So they made it clear enough that even I, who tends not to follow much in the way of instructions, could understand it. Let's get all these part sheets out, and then it looks like we also have cardstock shades and stuff. That's cool. So those will be neat to add. We'll keep those kind of safe and out of the way. And we've got what appears to be 3 different set of sprued parts. The sprue being the plastic that holds all these bits together, and we'll get all these guys off the sprue eventually and put it together, but I'm going to start with painting. I've made many a model structure before, but I have never done painting first. And by many, I mean like less than 10. So, much less than many of you guys. So they recommend going through and doing all the paint stuff first. They also recommend priming, and I will say, I didn't realize that primer might be a part of this, so I didn't go get any. So I think what we're gonna do, as a little bit of an experiment, is I'm pretty sure Nick probably had primer or primed his, and we'll be able to see the difference between an unprimed painted setup and a primed painted setup, and we can see what the difference there is. So we'll use it as a little experiment, shall we? But I'm gonna get set on painting this all together. So I have ponied up, as you do. You don't want to get your hair in the paint or paint in your hair, either way. And I used the biggest brush in the kit that they gave to do a coat of white on the walls. Both the garage and as well the house itself. And it looked like it was going on great on the house pieces, which were already white, without any primer. And the instructions specifically called out very much recommended. They actually said you don't necessarily need to paint the stuff, but it looks a lot better if you do. But they also really recommended that you use primer. And I can see why already in the garage. The garage pieces were slightly gray, kind of an off gray rather than pure white, like the house pieces are. And it didn't really take the paint in the same way. You're trying to change the color to a lighter color. So I definitely see the value of priming, and I would definitely agree with the instructions and recommend it. I've never actually painted structures before. I always just built them out of the plastic and then plopped them on the layout, and then maybe did some dry brushing at the end. But I also understand the merit of actually doing this on the sprue, because I'd only ever painted bits either after they'd been removed or once they had been put on the structure. And having them on the sprue means that you're not holding onto them, they're not fiddly, you're not worried about damaging a glued joint or something you've just done. It's just really easy and kind of carefree to have this laid out thing that you can paint. I'm gonna move on to next. I've done the white. I'm gonna do progressively darker colors, taking care of my brush or changing brushes in between colors here. So I don't know what it is about painting. It's the detail oriented or the precision or something, but it's never been something that I'm super comfortable with. So I see primer and I go, I should probably do that. It'll be okay. And then I decide not to, or, you know, I start getting after it and start doing a little painting and is it okay? Maybe, maybe not. And what I'm learning here is that the instructions are very good, and you should follow them. They mention that on the paints themselves, that you don't necessarily need to prime for darker colors, and you can absolutely see that. I've just done a second coat of the white, and then mistakenly tried to apply a little green to the window frame because I forgot that I just painted these. Oops. So that bled, but a little bit of paper towel damage mostly saved it. Maybe the garage is a little moldy. Maybe you've got an insulation problem. It's just a happy little garage. But you can see that you do have a little streaky without priming on those garage pieces. You can't see it on the cottage pieces, and the white kind of added a nice touch. But then you look at the dark gray, the D&H gray, that's just one coat, and it still hasn't dried all the way, which is why it's just one coat, but the dark colors apply so easily, which that makes sense, right? So definitely I would recommend priming, especially for the light colors, if not everything. I mean, if you're just applying primer or whatever. With the medium light colors, I've done 2 coats of the green on the windows and the door, or the window frames. Those turned out pretty good. So I'm gonna end up doing like 2 coats on everything, let it dry, and then there's a bunch of different surfaces on the garage walls and as well on the cottage walls that are little trim boards that I'm gonna try and just very daintily attempt to paint properly. My only other tip that I could think of while going is that if you get a big daub of paint on some of these handrails, the gaps are so small that the surface tension will fill them in. I'm imagining that I'll be able to poke it out when it dries, but I definitely filled in a handrail stanchion or 2, and I'm not thrilled with how it looks, but that's me having too much paint on the brush and using too much at once. So definitely keep a light touch, and quite frequently, I guess, would be my advice to anyone choosing to paint before you assemble this kit. All right, well, it's actually ended up being a couple days since I last filmed anything here. We had the Rocky Mountain Train Show in Denver. Everything's painted. Took several coats, and I tried to do a little extra trim work around the edges to try and zhuzh things up and make it look a little extra cool. Definitely the lighter colors took a lot of coats to really do, and even then the garage with its sort of kind of gray start color didn't quite absorb all the white, so I definitely think primer's probably a good idea. We'll see what Nick did. All in all, I'm not too mad about it. Some of the stuff was fiddly and definitely challenging for me with my paintbrush skills. It's not something that I hold and pride myself to, but I think it's come out pretty good seeing all the pieces laid out on the sheet. And I think we're to the point where we need to start assembling these things. I have the house completed, and I'm pretty thrilled with it, except I just noticed that my trim's coming undone. It's fine. This looks really great from far away. You look at it as I am really up close, and you can see some of the defects and things. I didn't file quite enough on the edge of the roof because I wasn't sure where things were gonna land, and then as well I didn't paint the edges of the roofs, I just painted the top sheet, so I'm gonna have to go back and do a little bit more touch up on that stuff, and same with some of the stuff around the porch. But overall, I'm pretty happy with it. I do like how my trim on the edge boards turned out. Actually, it looks pretty nice. So overall, pretty thrilled with how this came out, because this was actually like the hardest kit I've ever built. And it looks good. I mean, even with the paint imperfections that I need to go ahead and fix, one of the things that I did notice, and that was the biggest takeaway for me, was that painting beforehand, I didn't really understand how it was all gonna go together. The instructions gave a good sheet for that, but I didn't read through all the way first. I just read step by step and started painting. And I don't think I recommend my technique. I think if you read through and see how it's gonna go together, you'd have a better understanding of what you actually need to paint and what you should paint and all that stuff, rather than the way that I did it. And then one thing that I noticed for the fiddlier bits, like the chimney, that plastic cement is great to work with. It sets up and starts to set up really quick. But on the little stuff with big nubby fingers, well, I was getting the chimney glued to me, so cleaning my hands kind of helped that, and I let the glue set a little bit more before I pushed it together, and it ended up coming out looking really good. So definitely a time delay there on the glue. Big tip for you guys to learn with this glue. I couldn't get anything to come out of it when I opened it up. I assume it got to the lid and then cemented itself. A lot of cements and glues do that. And so I grabbed the nearest pointy things to go and cut it, and I actually put a little dent in my sprue nippers because these are not hard enough to cut metal. So I went and grabbed a pair of side cutters from my toolbox, and that made quick work of it. Don't use these for that. Use the proper tool for the proper job, not just what's quick. And that definitely helps out quite a bit here. And then getting a good amount of sanding done. And some of this stuff, like I'm sanding some of this stuff and it's like, well, I painted there. Okay, so I think there's gonna be definitely some touch-up work just in general, but I'm really thrilled with how that looked. That's the most in-depth paint I've ever tried on a model before, and as well as the most in-depth detailed kit. And I really do think it came out pretty nice. I'm pretty happy with that. It'll certainly look good enough from far away, especially once I touch up my couple spots that either me being clumsy with glue or otherwise caused to get exposed. I've also never used one of these sanding sticks before. I just would use loose sandpaper, and the stick having a little bit more mass to it has made this actually really easy to get these little nubbins filed off, which has been wonderful. Yeah, okay, well I already did the windows. I did the windows lock, stock, and barrel all together, so I'd just be ready to start gluing this together, and it doesn't look like it matters which one goes where, so you just do kind of a little dab, and then hold it in place for a little bit for it to set up a smidge, and then it starts to set up, and then you can bolster it with another wall. The tab system on this kit is really smart because it gives you a good way to line stuff up. At first I was worried because it was like, oh god, wait, are these free floating? And then you realize that there's little tabs between the walls and then the floor and then the walls and the other wall. And it makes it really easy to line everything up and make sure that it's actually gonna be closed flush when you actually go to assemble the rest of it, so that you don't have walls that are, and gaps peeking out and all that stuff. So it's pretty slick how they did that. I've not seen that exact setup before. Although it's been a long time since I've built model kits in general. The glue cement sets up pretty quick, but it remains workable for a little bit. So you can kind of get it applicated in a light amount, and then you can hold it in place for just a little bit, and then it becomes pretty easy to tighten up. And that's already looking pretty quick. There we go. And I'm also seeing more stuff that I probably should have painted again. Like I painted the trim boards that were raised and extruded on the model with brown and freehand. I should have masked them, honestly. Should have made the corresponding marks on the side, and I didn't. So again, just some little touch-up stuff, and it'll be there. It would probably make sense for me to touch these up before I put them on the structure itself, but I know how behind I am on this episode and getting it out for you guys, so I appreciate everyone bearing with me with my busy schedule. It's been hard to sit down for a couple days and spend a couple days of light time doing this. It has some cool joists modeled in it. It doesn't seem like it has any hard spot it sets up at, but I will get just a little bit more glue, make sure that it sits in there. It's really easy to go overboard with this stuff, and then I will try and clean off the tip the best I can, and then we'll seal it, so hopefully I don't have to go stabbing at it with the side cutters next time I pull it out, but there it is. There's a garage and a pile of parts. So we'll set up the house. It's got a front porch, back porch, it'll go there, and then the garage goes off to the side. Little touch-ups to do, but honest to God, I'm pretty thrilled with this. This has been a wonderful time getting to make this. Once again, thank you to Walthers for sponsoring this, and thanks so much for watching. Let's go check out what Nick did.
I love building plastic kits. There's a calm and serenity that I experience when it comes to knowing that if I follow these steps, this is the end product that I'm gonna get. This is exactly what it's gonna look like, or close enough. This house and this garage were certainly true to that point. One thing that I want to point out that I think is very important when you're building a plastic kit and you want it to look as realistic as possible is spray paint your parts. Even if you want to use the same colors, even if you want to preserve the colors and use a clear satin spray, it makes it look less plasticky and more realistic. For the house and the garage, I ended up using a white spray paint that gives just a slight off-white that makes it look more realistic. The roofs and the detail parts on the house and the garage door, those blacks, dark grays were airbrushed. Airbrushing is something that's actually new to me. I've only started to get into it more, and it is a process. It is a lot of things to learn in airbrushing, but the benefits are that you can have some really cool weathered patterns. And when it came to the roof, I didn't want a straight, flat black look to it. I wanted it to look imperfect. And so I moved my brush around and did different amounts of dark gray, and that gave the result that you see here. The construction and assembly was straightforward. Both my wife and I worked on different parts of things, and it was fun to put together. In the edit, I want to add in this note as well. 2 tips for working with super glue. Number 1 is rather than applying the glue directly from the bottle to the part, apply it to a tray or a piece of scrap paper and use a toothpick to actually apply it to the part. That way you have easier control over how much you're putting on. Second, when you're ready to store the glue, use a little bit of Vaseline around the tip of the bottle as well as the cover, whatever you're using to seal the glue in, and that will help to prevent it from hardening. It looks really nice in the context of this scene, and it's going to look even better once we have some more scenery surrounding it. Back to you, Heiss.
As always, guys, thank you so much for watching. I hope you learned something or learned something from my mistakes. This kit series has been so much fun, and I'm looking forward to month number 5. Again, thank you so much for watching.
When you get that kit, it's got that plastic shine to it. It looks less realistic. So what I ended up doing was painting. Luca, just stay in a place and stay there.